Let's talk about trigger weights, guys. Got a pretty good question here. I'm curious if you have any strong feelings on trigger weight on the Staccato P and in general, since it's noticeably heavier than the XC because of it being the duty model. I appreciate your videos, however short. Well, that's very nice of you to say. So let's talk about trigger on the Staccato P, and then I'll talk about, well, this is the wrong staccato. Let's talk about this, the trigger on the Staccato P and what I want from the trigger generally. Uh, and I think, I don't know, maybe you'll find it interesting. So on the Staccato P, it's a 2011 trigger, right? So there's not a lot of travel. You can see there's pretty minimal take up. There's some take up, but it's not a ton. Take up, then there's a firm wall. Press through the wall. Then there's a little bit of over travel, and that's it. All right. So what I want from the trigger primarily is that I can feel what the hell I'm doing. Now I want the trigger to work in a predictable way. So, meaning like this is very easy to feel what it's doing. There's like a little bit of play, the take up, there's a wall where I can feel what's happening, and then there's enough travel or over travel that again I can feel that my fingers, yep, I've released the sear, the gun's gonna go off. What I want primarily is that feel where I can tell what the trigger's doing. A good example, it's a Gen 4 Lock 34. I don't believe it's a fat. I think it's got a different spring. I think it has Terran Tactical Striker spring, but that's it. Okay. This is not a trigger that a lot of people think is great. However, it still has those properties, right? There's a little bit of play or take up. Then there's this wall there. Now it's kind of mushy, right? But I can push through the mushy wall, and then there's a little bit of over travel. So I can feel everything that this is doing. It's just longer travel and it's a little bit heavier, so I can't pull the trigger as fast. I can't shoot as many rounds a second. And if the shots are demanding, I need to be a little bit more careful to make sure I pull the trigger straight. But I can do all the things with this trigger. I really can. I can do the things I need to do. Now, some properties of triggers will start to annoy me. So here's a good example, like stacking, having the trigger stack. It's not the CZ, but the Tanfolos I used to shoot. They would stack. So as I roll pressure on, it takes more pressure to roll the trigger back. So it'd go like the pressure would be like 4, 5, 6, 7 pounds, then boom, the gun would go off. That doesn't really bother me because that feels again, it feels like I'm just steadily adding weight. I got used to that stacking up pressure. It's predictable to me, like I can feel what it's doing. So it's like that doesn't really bother me. But if there's goofy stuff like a little hitch or like I don't know, like anything, I mean this would be obvious to people, but if it feels like the trigger has a little hitch or burrs in it, I don't like that. If it lets off, so if it goes from 5 pounds to 6 pounds of pressure, then to 4 pounds of pressure as I'm pulling through it, the let off can be really annoying. But that stuff's pretty unusual. When it's the more competition-y triggers, what I don't like, honestly, is when people get them too light. And the Shadow's a really good example of this. A common modification on the Shadow 2s that I don't care for is to lighten the trigger return spring. Now, of course, you get a lighter, thinner trigger return spring. I think it's more liable to breaking. That's one thing, but I can't feel what the trigger's doing that well. So with these things, after the gun goes off, boom, the gun goes off. The reset on my Shadow, it's pretty aggressive. Like I can feel the trigger pushing into my finger, and it's like the gun wants to reset. Um, if you have a lighter return spring there, yeah, the poundage to pull the trigger is less. Or is yeah, it's less, but like the in terms of feel, like it's tough for me to tell what I'm doing, especially when I'm juiced up with adrenaline, like under pressure or something like that. I can't feel feedback off the trigger. So when it comes to like competition-y type of style of triggers, like that is the thing I don't like. They're so light I can't feel what they're doing, which is like on the Shadows, a lot of people do that. They're light that they're unreliable, which obviously that's a problem. Uh, But yeah, like guys just focus on the number of the pull weight, and it's like that's not really the part that I focus on. Now, talking about the staccato trigger specifically, the XC, the lightest trigger that they offer, the 2.5 pound, and mine's worn in, it's broken in pretty well. As I touch this trigger, it's got a little bit of take up, it's got a firm wall. Then I press through the wall, a little bit of over travel. So to me, like this trigger is doing all the things that I want it to do. It is. It's like this is a light trigger, sure, but it's a good and reliable trigger from where I sit. Like it's had hammer follow like a I think a couple of instances and then right away put more pressure on the sear. It's been working good since. Like aside from that, like this is on the edge, but this is like a reliable-ish type of trigger that would be okay. Like I'm fine with this trigger in terms of feel. With the Staccato P, this is the 3.5 pound trigger version. This is the same in terms of properties as the XC. It just has a little bit more weight to it. And I think you get that little extra margin of reliability. I don't think this is as liable to hammer follow or anything like that. So to me, this is a sensible type of trigger for a duty style gun, right? Again, I have good feel. I can tell what I'm doing with it. It's got the reliability, more so than the XC, I think. So yeah, I mean this feels fine with me. If the trigger was lighter, aside from reliability, like if this had an XC trigger in terms of the weight, would I be comfortable with that? Yeah, I guess I would be comfortable with it, but probably I wouldn't want to issue that to people if I was responsible for making those decisions. I'd be just like, nah, like give them the heavier version of it because it's like a little bit heavier. It's a little bit more weight, but it I don't even think it slows you down. You can just feel a little bit more with the trigger. So that's it. That's my thoughts on trigger weight.